Even though we have actually officially entered the dog days of summer, there's a lot happening in the world of politics. From the latest news about Pedro Espada Jr. to the rather confusing end of session and the remaining uncertainty over whether the budget will actually get done, we are once again joined to break it all down by our insiders. They are veterans of the Albany political scene who share their insights on the Capitol and the campaign trail every week. Tonight we're joined by Bob Bellafiore. He's a former press secretary to Governor Pataki and now a senior partner at Eric Mower and Associates. Across the table is Steve Greenberg, former communications director to two Assembly speakers, now a spokesman for the Siena Research Institute. Thank you, as usual, for joining me. Lovely to see you both looking so tanned and rested. It's nice.
It's the dog days of summer.
It is the dog days of summer, and some of us have been sunning ourselves in the summer rays.
Absolutely.
So the latest we have, as mentioned, Pedro Espada. What do you make of this Democratic effort to oust him? Is it a stunt, or is it real?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, it's certainly a stunt, and it's accomplishing what it's set out to do. It's getting a lot of attention across the media. But I think the bottom line is it's fair to say that, to paraphrase Groucho Marx a little bit, that nobody wants to be a member of the same party as Pedro Espada. So I think the Democratic leadership is saying, gee, you know, we can get some attention and show that he's not one of us.
But a party isn't a club, Steve. It's not like you just kick people out with, you know, because you don't like them. I mean, I understand that Pedro Espada is a guy who's been accused of stuff, but I mean, now aren't you starting down a little bit of a slippery slope?
Well, I always thought it was any voters' constitutional right to sign up with any party they wanted to, and the party couldn't kick them out. I mean, you can't excommunicate a member of a political party. You can register with who you want to register with.
Although apparently you can.
No, there is election law. It does say in the election law that you can, but I'm not so certain that they tried this with him in 2002, and it didn't work, actually.
Well, the fact of the matter is that Pedro Espada is the political equivalent of the baby with a dirty diaper. Nobody wants to hold the guy. Nobody wants to be near him because he smells. So politically, he's got a stink to him. And no.
Sorry, continue. Just go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
Nobody wants to be around him. So it happened last year with the coup. You know, people sort of reluctantly brought him on just for the purposes of the numbers. So everybody wants to distance themselves from him as much as humanly possible.
Right, and I think what the Democrats are afraid of is that Republicans will use Pedro Espada when they're going after incumbent Democrats, whether it's Brian Foley or David Valesky or Darrell Aubertine. And what the Democrats are trying to do here is say, look, he's not one of us.
Okay, but let's stay with the baby analogy. Everybody's held this baby, and nobody changed him.
No.
I mean, the problem is that if you try and do that, if you are going to say you're the Democrats saying to the Republicans, well, you took him in the coup, and it's not our fault, the Republicans will be like, yeah, and you took him back.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, isn't everybody culpable here?
Not to mix these metaphors, but the Republicans only dated him for a week. The Democrats have married him.
Twice.
Right,
Three times, actually.
Right. And, you know, he can run as a Democrat, I think, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, if he gets enough signatures in his district to be on the Democratic Party line in the ballot.
Right.
So there's no way to stop him from that. So as messy as democracy is, the Democrats may have to live with it.
Okay,
but the bottom line is, go back to your original question. Yeah, it's a stunt.
There was a question?
Yeah, there was.
Sorry.
This is a stunt by the Democrats. And they're trying to show the world that they are distancing themselves from somebody they don't want to smell.
And at the end of the day, he still may be on their line, and they may be stuck with him as a Democrat just the same.
Well, just today we saw Attorney General Andrew Cuomo say, oh, well, you know, I think the party's made themselves clear. I can't talk about it because, and it's very handy for him, I'm investigating him, and so I can't really talk about this. Yet, can he really fairly disassociate himself from this? I see Steve shaking his head. He knows exactly what I'm going to say. You want to take a crack at this?
Sure. I mean, you know, Andrew Cuomo is the standard bearer of the Democratic Party. He can't separate himself out, even though he may try rhetorically, from what the actions of the state Democratic Party. The executive director of the state party was put in there by Andrew Cuomo, was Andrew Cuomo's former running mate 8 years ago. So this action is clearly being done with the permission, the authority, maybe even the direction of Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily.
No,
that
it's.
he can
I mean,
divorce himself from this.
Charlie King can't order lunch without people thinking that Andrew Cuomo was behind it. So the fact of the matter is, they are stuck with it. And Andrew, if he's elected, will be the leader of the party. Even if he's not elected, he'll still be the leader of the Democratic Party.
Well, he actually is doing a lot of behind-the-scenes actions. I mean, let's talk about what his efforts were in the budget. Now you're seeing reports. New York Magazine, for example, Chris Smith is a great reporter, writes, well, there are people, unnamed Democratic and et cetera, lawmakers who say, this is Andrew's budget. Andrew's fingerprints are all over this budget. He talked to Larry Schwartz, the governor's chief of staff, every day. I mean, was it, while saying also, well, I'm weighing in from afar, I like this, I like that, but then actually really hands-on getting himself involved in that budget?
Well, if Andrew Cuomo was the puppet master behind this budget, nobody's going to find his fingerprints on any marionette. So even if he was that involved, he is smart enough to understand how to have a conversation to get what he wants done without it being, there being a trail back to him. The fact that this is the legislature's budget and it's David Patterson's budget. They're the ones who voted for it, and I think Andrew, though, likes, as much as he wouldn't want to be attached to a budget being made now, especially this budget, sort of likes the fact that everybody thinks he's behind it. I think he feels like it adds to his power and adds to his clout, whether it's real or perceived.
I think he certainly wants the insiders to feel that way, but I think he certainly would want the public to feel quite the opposite, that he had nothing to do with this. And I think, while he will never admit this, I think he likes the ongoing dysfunction. He likes the fact that the budget is still not done, because the more dysfunction there is, the easier it is for him to come forward and say, look, I'm the one who's going to stop the dysfunction and solve it.
Right. And the gap between what the insiders know and think they know and what the public pays attention to and remembers is cavernous.
But there is, I mean, you're seeing a pattern here of trying to have it both ways. While having people who are clearly allied with you try and get rid of Pedro Espada because he's a problem, particularly when you're running against the legislature and saying the legislature is bad, trying to get rid of sort of the worst apple in the barrel, but then say you can't comment on it, trying to influence the budget, but then saying that you're not influencing the budget.
So there's an ambitious politician who's trying to have it both ways. Well, we better alert the media real quickly on that one.
We just have.
Okay.
Well, just before we leave the topic of Espada, though, is it not problematic to start agitating him at a time when the budget isn't actually done? There's still a revenue bill out there, and last I checked, you needed 32 votes to get something passed in the Senate.
That is a great point, and that is really intriguing in terms of the timing of this, because it's going to make John Sampson's job that much harder to try and hold 32 votes, and when he makes a deal, if he makes a deal with the Speaker and the Governor.
It's not like Pedro Espada is ever going to cross the aisle and vote with the Republicans, so come on, I mean, let's be serious.
Really? Is that what you're trying to say?
No,
You almost kept a straight face for about a half a second.
I'm agreeing. It's a very high risk game. I mean, John Sampson has a difficult enough time getting 32 votes on anything.
Right.
Ruben Diaz Sr. is already a wild card, as you know from having dealt with him as much as any other reporter. You go to Ruben Diaz because you never quite know what he's going to say or do. And John Sampson has the same problem. Now he adds to that Pedro Espada, who's feeling alienated and pushed out, and it just makes the already steep challenge of getting the revenue side of this budget finalized that much more difficult.
You know, we haven't heard from John Sampson yet. With this story first broke in the New York Post on Monday, and then since it's been confirmed and the state party has formally said, yes, we are trying, we would like the Bronx to get rid of Pedro Espada, or at least start the proceedings. Haven't heard from John Sampson, but we have heard from Ruben Diaz, who actually stood up for Pedro Espada. So it's kind of it'll be interesting to see how this develops. In terms of the budget, will we or won't we? Are they coming back?
You know, I think at some point they're going to have to come back, because there's a huge hole right now between the spending that they've already agreed to and the revenues that they think are going to be there in this revenue bill to pay for all of that. So they're going to have to come back at some point, and if they don't come back now and do the $2 billion that everybody I think says is in the revenue bill, then they'll have to come back later, because the state will have a massive hole in it. I mean, most of the revenues necessary to